Hi everybody and welcome. My name's Rob from the Rotherham Cycle Hub.
I'm Jamie from the Barnsley Active Travel Hub.
And in this episode 7 of our bike maintenance mini-series, we're just going to be talking about your drivetrain, which is your gears and everything like that, and just a few things to look out for, a few little tips you can do to make sure everything's running smoothly and better. So Jamie's going to run you through the first few things.
So I'm just going to quickly run you through some of the things that you might need to know about your chain in terms of safety and also wear and tear as well. We'll begin by just running the chain through the drivetrain to check it's free of any obstructions and that it's not running stiffly. So maybe a little more difficult if the bike is on the floor, but if you just pedal the bicycle, check that the chain is running smoothly, there's no obstructions in the jockey wheels here, there's no obstructions in the chain wheel at the front. You don't want there to be any links in the chain that are bent or any that are seized up. You may notice as you're pedaling that the chain jumps at a specific point every time when you pedal it, and that might be a sign of those problems. Obviously, if your chain is deformed or damaged in this way, it will need replacing. And to take it further in that respect, I would always recommend you take it to your local bike shop. Moving forward, the chain is also one of the more common parts on the bicycle to wear down as you ride the bicycle more. So, all these little individual pivots on the chain, just over time and use, slightly wear down, and that has the effect of elongating the entire chain. When this happens, it also starts to wear out the other components on your bike. From a safety point of view, the chain is now also weaker and more liable to snap. But also, if the chain is allowed to get very worn, it will damage all the components on the bicycle and will be much more costly to replace. So it's always good to keep on top of your chain wear and keep replacing parts as they wear out. It's very difficult to sight how much your chain is worn just by looking at it. You may notice some deformities in the barrels themselves. You can use a tool to measure the wear of the chain, and you'll know when it is time to replace the chain and when to preempt that and replace it before it becomes unsafe. Also, periodically you will obviously need to oil and clean your chain. It's very important for smooth running of your bicycle. If the chain is allowed to get too dry, again it's at more risk of snapping and breaking and will be giving you less than optimum drive on the bicycle. Alternatively, when a chain gets too dirty, it picks up a lot of muck off the road and stuff as you're riding and will sort of additionally degrade the rest of the bicycle. So always clean the chain before you were to oil it. This chain is obviously clean, but always just run a bit of rag or cloth through the chain to really get off all of the dirt that you can see on it visually. You may want to use a degreaser for this as well. After that stage, you can oil the chain, and the part of the chain that you want to oil are all the individual barrels. So if you just oil individually all the way around, that should give you a really good coverage. And always remember with your rag to wipe off the excess afterwards. Moving on, it's also important just to check that the cassette or freewheel on your bike is tight. Although that's clamped on by the wheel, you can just grab it, make sure nothing moves, and that's securely fastened on. The chain and freewheel is very difficult to sight when that's actually worn out, so if your chain is worn, we'd always recommend take it to a bike shop and they can assess how much of it you'll need to replace. So I'll just pass you on over to Rob and he'll talk a little bit about gears and derailleurs.
So with gears and derailleurs, can be quite daunting, there can be quite a lot going on, and you can get a few different styles and different types, but generally the same principles apply, and there's some, the basic things you can check are largely the same. So to show you here on this bike, we've got the rear derailleur here, and there's a few little things you can check. Most importantly really is how straight the derailleur is, and also what's called a derailleur hanger. This is a little bit of metal that comes down and attaches the derailleur to the frame. Now, it's really important that that bit of metal is nice and straight. If you find it's bent inwards, it can cause the chain to drop and fall into your wheel. If it's bent too far outwards, it can cause it to fall off on the outside, and it can cause your gears to be a bit all over the place in the middle there. So you want to make sure that that's nice and straight. If it looks really bent, you're probably going to have a lot of problems with your gears. At best, it can be a bit annoying. At worst, it can be quite dangerous. So make sure that that's nice and straight, and you do that just by visually checking and making sure that it points directly down at the ground. If it is the case it is bent, that's something a bike shop can sort out. Best to take it to them where they've got the specialist tools to do that. And it's also important to know, if you don't have a kickstand on your bike and you do lay your bike down on the ground when you're not riding it, always try and lay it so that this part, the derailleur, is pointing upwards. So it's not going to get squashed, it's not going to get bent or damaged in any way. So you will notice on your derailleur, there's a number of screws and also kind of like barrel adjusters here that you can twist and turn. Generally speaking, unless you know what you're doing, it's probably best to stay clear of kind of like playing around with those. They adjust how far your derailleur can either move or how it moves in between gears. So if you're not too sure how those work, leave those to a bike mechanic, but it's best to make sure that they do look in good condition, they're kind of clean, and that every now and again you lubricate them. Should you need to adjust them, they're nice and free. It's also worth having a look there at where the cable is attached to your derailleur. Make sure that bolt's nice and tight. Also the condition of your cable, if it's frayed, if it's looking a bit tired, and the cable that kind of comes round here as well. Any damage in here, any kind of like cracking of the outer, that can cause your gears to not work as well as they should do. So have a good look at it. A lot of this stuff you can do visually, and if it is looking tired or looking sad, get it to a bike shop and have them look at it. Equally as well, you do have your front derailleur. Works very similar to the rear one. Just it's more of a case of have a look, make sure everything's straight and not bent, make sure everything's nicely lined up and that your chain's not rubbing on any parts. And make sure it's nice and tight and that nothing moves and wiggles around where it shouldn't do. Any problems with that, it's something that a bike shop can look at and can sort. And a lot of these things, if you check them and catch them in good time, they're fairly inexpensive to sort out. You can go into a lot of detail about how gears work and various bits and pieces. So have a look out for other videos, more in-depth things about what you're looking at, because yeah, there is quite a bit to learn, but basic checks, make sure everything's straight, in-lined, and not making any nasty noises.